Okay, um, Superman and Jesus. Or Superman is inspired by Jesus. This is part two. Um, I went ahead and watched Man of Steel again to make sure I was all accurate, and I did find out that it was Kansas that Jesus was, or that Superman was raised up in Kansas in the movie. Um, but we're going to start back up with part two, showing you how Jesus, basically, how Superman is inspired by Jesus. That basically, they're the same type of character. Um, so here we go. As the story is told, Clark Kent, when he grows up to become a man, is very strong and wise. Okay, he chooses to sacrifice his life that he could have lived, wife and family, to help the people of the world, to save them from the evil people that live and the hurt and destruction that they choose to bring upon their fellow people. Okay? This is either for their personal gain or expense to someone else's misery, as long as it isn't them, which the evil people do that. That they're the enemy. That is the enemy who does that. The demons inside them. Or just because they hate the world and everything in it. The enemy. That's the demons inside them as well, because all demons hate humanity, because they can't ever go to heaven again because they were cast out. So that is the enemy. Clark Kent chose to hide himself so that the outside world could not recognize him, as he knew that if that the enemy did recognize him, then they would harm his family, his mother, Lois, all those people. Other than just the normal people that he protected, but like I said, those actual right there that he was very, very strongly affectionate towards, who he strongly loved that were in his life. Um, so he knew that the enemy couldn't harm him because he had the super powers, he was super strength and he could fly and all this other kind of stuff, all this stuff that he had on the earth. But his people that he knew, the people that he loved, personally loved in his circle, were just human. They were very, very vulnerable. So he had to, you know, not stay attached to them, or had to not be attached to any of them in order for the enemy to not have someone to attach to, or to just try to destroy someone that he loved to hurt him. So he made that sacrifice. So that's part of what Superman did. Okay, as the history is written in the Bible, Jesus, when he grows up to become a man, is very spiritually strong and wise. Obviously, he chooses to sacrifice his life that he could have lived, wife and family. Could have lived a life of having. He could have got a wife. He could have got a family. He was a carpenter. I'm sure some woman would have wanted to be his wife, and they would have had a family, and then he would have had grandchildren, and lived a life that everybody basically everybody tries to have in this world, but he didn't choose that life. He chose to save the people from the evil people that live and the hurt and destruction that they choose to bring upon their fellow people. Just like Superman. This is either for their personal gain and expense to someone else's misery, as long as it isn't them. Once again, same story, exact same story, different time, same demons, as long as it isn't them. The enemy, or just because they hate the world and everything in it. The enemy, same thing, same demons, same thing. Jesus of Nazareth chose to hide himself so that the outside world would not recognize him. Spiritually, he didn't, or even physically in the beginning before his ministry, he chose to stay at his father's house and do carpentry work and just live a normal life, other than getting a wife and a family and all that. It was just a normal life, on his own, living at his parents' house. So, because once again, he knew that if the spirits, recognized who he was, and he was living in the spirit and he was doing all these things in the spirit, then they would go after his family to hurt him. Just the same exact thing. His family was just merely human, and they were vulnerable. I'm sure his father would protect him in a certain amount, but like I said, they would still cause him stress and anger and anguish, and try to go after him all the time and all this kind of stuff. So he sacrificed that in order to save them, help them. Um, he never once exclaimed that his powers came from him, or I'm sorry. Yeah, so basically the enemy couldn't harm him, obviously because he had God on his side. His God was, you know, saying, okay, you are not going to die until I tell you you're going to die, until your assignment is up. And he knew that. He had God in his head. So like I said, he had his Father in his head, so he knew who he was, and he knew that he wasn't going to die until God said he was going to die, and so he did not fear death, basically. But of course, the enemy could still get to those he loved, specifically like his mother. Um, so, you know, basically that's it. So we go on to Clark again. Okay, as the story is told, Clark Kent chooses to employ himself as a journalist at a newspaper to hide himself from society, and also to make sure that he knew what was going on in the world, so that he knew when he could go and help um, people. So he figured that was like the good place to be, to know what was going on in the world and who needed his help, who was not strong enough to fight for themselves. So he would go and help them. Um, he chose to physically disguise himself, whenever he was helping people, with a suit that donned his alien father's symbol. Um, he got it from his father, at the ship that was there, that already had the symbol on it, which was a symbol for their family. Um, his good deeds, saving others from evil people, earned him the name Superman. He didn't give himself this name. That's what they called him, even though the S was on his, chest. So the S in the symbol, which Superman did not recognize as an S, represented hope, and that's what his father told him, is that the symbol represented hope. And that was what his family represented on Krypton, was hope. That their civilization could move forward and live in synchronization with the human race, which is what Superman was there to do. Be a bridge between their realm, their race, and then the human race. So this was told to him by his father on a hologram. So he basically wore the alien, mark on his chest, the family crest on his chest, as he was as he was saving these people in this disguise. So he basically was, proclaiming to everybody, hey, this doesn't come from me. It comes from this symbol. It comes from hope. It comes from my father. All this power is not just me, not from me. It's from them. It's from him. Um, Basically the same thing. Um, it's told in the story that throughout his life he continually helped others, his neighbors, forsaking his own fleshly, worldly desires for the betterment of man and not the betterment of himself. Superman sacrificed his life lived to save humanity. Okay? Now we'll go on to Jesus again. As history is written in the Bible, Jesus of Nazareth chose to employ himself as a carpenter, as his earthly father has passed on the skill to him. However, he also chose, as I'm sure, to spiritually disguise himself in that realm as much as he could, so the enemy would not harm those close to him once again. However, when it was his time, he chose to leave that life and live a life as a traveler by the will of God. That was when he started his ministry. He had a ministry of 3.5 years. His good deeds saved others from evil people, earned him the name Jesus Christ. He was prophesied, and they said, this is Jesus Christ. And he didn't give himself that name. It was given to him by the people from who he was, his continence, how he acted, how he loved people, how he healed people. That was all, given to him by the people, and obviously by his father through the people. So through his teaching and continence, he brought the hope of heaven and the good news of the abolition, of the doctrines of other so-called gods, demons. All the doctrines, any doctrines other than Jesus and his Father are demons. I'm sorry to say, they just are. You can't. They're dead. You can't pray to them. They can't help you. They'll say they can help you, but like I said, and then you can sometimes see it manifested in the spiritual that they're helping you. And I mean, but like I said, everything that they're doing is dark. It's evil. It'll eventually take you down. It'll eventually you'll find somebody who's stronger than you, who's in the stronger in the dark than you are, and then they'll take you down, and the enemy will, be defeated, and you'll be defeated with the enemy, and then, eventually you'll realize, okay, all of this was given to me by the wrong one, you went about it the wrong way, because you're following demons instead of following the God who you can pray to. And a righteous person, if a righteous person prays, then the prayer gets answered. So if it's the will of God. But Jesus came down and said, with only 2 commandments to follow to stay in his heavenly Father's will, instead of the 10, instead of the 150, instead of all the other things that the doctrines say, all that kind of stuff that you must do, and you must have this, or else you'll be excommunicated, and you can't go to heaven, and all this kind of stuff. It's not true. None of it's true, okay, guys? It's 2 commandments, and I've said this over and over again, and I'll continue to say it over and over again. They are, love your God, the only God, his heavenly Father, with all your heart, soul, and mind, okay? Next one is love your neighbor as yourself. He exclaimed these 2 commandments in the 4 Gospels, in Jesus Unraveled. He explained them. These encompass the 10 commandments given to Moses by his heavenly Father. Okay? Within all his encounters as he journeyed, he continued to exclaim that his powers did not come from him, but from his heavenly Father. He said it over and over and over again. Okay? He knew that it wasn't from him. He prayed and he asked his Father for everything. Healings, the bread turning into thousands of pieces of bread, 5 loaves and 2 fish, turned into many, 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 many pieces of bread and fish. He prayed. He gave thanks, to his Father and said, Lord, I know you can do, our Father, I know you can do this, and he did it, to basically feed the people. And like I said, he was feeding people with food, actual food that nourished their body. And then he also fed them with food of knowledge, of wisdom that fed their soul, fed their heart. Once again, same thing. Jesus is food. He said this many times. I said this in a video previous to this. Jesus is food. Okay, his wisdom is food. Okay. It is written in the Bible that throughout his life he continually helped others, his neighbors, forsaking his own fleshly, worldly desires for the betterment of man and not for the betterment of himself. Obviously, he didn't take a house. He didn't ride a horse. He rode a donkey into that town, but it was just because it was prophesied to do that. He didn't ride anything. He didn't have people carry him on their shoulders. Like the kings and queens of those days did. They carried him. A bunch of people carrying him up on a couple of rods. With curtains on them and just riding in there. He didn't have that. He could have had that. I'm sure people would have done it. I'm sure they loved him that much where they would have put him up on a pedestal and they would have said, yeah, I'll do this for you. But Jesus said, no, I don't want any of that. I am a traveler. I'm a vagabond. I don't need any of that. I will walk just like you'll walk. Nobody will ride. Nobody will hold me up above everybody else and all that kind of stuff. That's not what Jesus was. That's not who Jesus was. That's what God wanted to show the people, is that, you don't have to be this great, great, great person in order to have wisdom and strength spiritually, who can, slay demons and slay, sicknesses and disease and all this kind of stuff. You don't have to be that person. You don't have to be that person. And I'm not saying that you can't be that person. You can, as long as you don't allow it to be to get in between you and God, and then he'll take it away, but you have to put God first. You have to have Christ as the head, and then, you're the body, and that's just the way, it is. You know. So references can be found outside the Bible of this great man and his followers, mostly by Jesus' enemies and their hatred of them. You know, Jesus Christ sacrificed his life, lived to save humanity. It's plain and simple. Um, that was his assignment, and he took his assignment and he accomplished it. Okay. As told before, Superman sacrificed his life, lived to save humanity. Superman's descent into death is not told in the story. He didn't die in the movie Man of Steel. However, if he was to be killed, if it was possible, because he had all those powers, how could you kill him? Even the people, his brothers from his realm, which would be the demons, doing the evil with all the powers that they had, still couldn't kill him, because he had good on his side. He was good. He was a righteous man, so he was not allowed to die. Even though there was so many things that were trying to kill him, these things were trying to kill him over and over and over again, and all these things that looked so impossible tried to kill him, but he didn't. It couldn't kill him. I mean, nothing could kill him. So due to his powers. So I'm sure that it would be due to his enemies if he was to be killed, or maybe people that did not trust him and feared for their own destruction by his hands. Now, like I said, in other movies, in other Superman movies, you can see that they use this rock called kryptonite that actually can kill him. They try to kill him many times, make knives with the kryptonite and stab him and all this kind of stuff, but he always comes out of it. He always gets saved, you know, um, by circumstance, and he always gets his powers back and all that kind of stuff because he is righteous. He is a man who is righteous. Okay, and he will not die until basically he's meant to die. Until the world doesn't need him anymore, or not really need him anymore, but until he's assigned to die, which I don't think he's ever really died in any of the movies except for the really bad one, which I won't watch. So he may have been resurrected. I don't know. I didn't watch that one because I didn't want to see Superman being evil. They portrayed him as being evil, and he was not an evil man. He and there's nothing that could have made him evil. He was just a good, righteous man. Um, so Okay, so towards the end of the movie, Man of Steel, with one other in particular, which was General Zod, who was supposed to basically represent the devil, Satan, in this movie. Um, the member of Kal-El's race on Krypton came down looking for him because he was carrying the key to Krypton's rebirth. These were the same individuals that caused the destruction of Krypton. Obviously, same thing. The war in heaven. They were the same ones that caused the destruction. You know, of everything. And they were all thrown down to earth. And that's the reason why they hate humans so much, is because they were thrown down to earth and they can't ever get back to heaven. um, so they tried to kill him and take Superman's birthright, which was the Codex, as they called it. They killed and destroyed many people to show off their powers and plan to take over and kill all humans in the world. Just like the demons do, just like the people who allow demons to use them and all that kind of stuff. That's all they want. They want to take over the world. They want to rule the world. But a lot of what all of them don't realize is that there's only going to be 10 people, according to the Bible. There's only going to be 10 people in all the world who rules the world. So if you've got thousands of people who are working towards this, they don't realize that there's only going to be 10 of them. Plain and simple. So a lot of them are just going to get thrown to the wolves. They're going to get betrayed. Because that's what evil people do, is they betray each other. Because they're being run by demons and they only care about themselves. So it's hard not to betray anybody. So they killed and destroyed many people to show off their powers and plan to take over and kill all humans in the world. Rebuilding the world, Krypton on Earth. they would have done it too, except Superman used his powers to finally defeat and kill the leader of their group, only due to the fact that his evil brother was threatening to kill with his laser eyes a human family and would not stop. See, Superman did not want, with all of his might, he didn't want to kill him, because he was a good man. He didn't want to kill anybody, not no matter if the guy was that evil, he didn't want to kill him, so he literally cried out in pain for having to commit this act to save the innocent family, in the movie, because that's just how much he cared about people, even, ones that were doing the evil things that they were doing, trying to destroy him, just trying to destroy everything else, killing everybody, trying to destroy the whole world, he still didn't want to kill him, So Superman never before or after killed anyone else in the movie. This was the love and care and righteousness shown by his character. So you have to ask yourself, when you look at the movie and you watch the movie, please go watch the movie and put all this towards it and see that I'm not making this stuff up. So you have to ask yourself, who do you want to emulate? Do you want to emulate the one who abused the powers that were given to them and killed and stole and destroyed anybody and everybody in their anybody and everybody in their way to get to be rulers of the world? Is that who you want to be? Is that who anybody wants to be? That's horrible to be that person, yeah, you might be that person, but you're not going to have any friends. You're not going to have anybody that really loves you, and they're only going to be there just because you have these things, and as soon as you don't have these things, they're going to leave you and betray you. So it's not a thing to be. It's not a thing to strive for. And also, these people, they're only there to destroy everyone for their own perceived gain, which is their will. Is that who you want to be? You have to choose a side. Then you got the other one, the man who has the powers, and chose not to abuse them in order to save his fellow man that were vulnerable to the enemy. Plain and simple. Who do you want to emulate? Who do you want to be? And do you want to be General Zod and his crew, who said they have no morals so that they have a higher evolution, which is a bunch of crap, because if you look at evolution, you look at DNA, if you want to go into that, you can go into Divine Proof and you can see, DNA strands and all that kind of stuff. And that evolution basically is when you lose things. You didn't see animals that we consider to be dinosaurs and stuff like that. You didn't see them getting bigger and gaining things. No, they didn't gain nothing. They lost DNA. Evolution is a loss of something. You don't see animals of the same kind, wolves, or saber-toothed cats and all that we find. Bones of, they had saber tooth back then because they had to defend themselves. And if they were just a cat, they didn't have nothing to defend themselves. So they had to, God had to give them a horn, to defend themselves, or teeth, that come out that are really sharp, to be able to defend themselves and not die. So basically, but they lost that. You see what I'm saying? That they lost those teeth. They didn't gain them. They lost them. It was a loss of DNA. You can't ever take a small dog and make it bigger. It's gonna the small gene is always gonna take over. And obviously you can't mix a really small dog with a really big dog because it just doesn't work. It's not physically possible. It's not how God meant it to be. But like I said, it's all of the same kind. So it will mix, and you can't mix different kinds together, and I really didn't mean to go off into all that, but, that's basically it, so of course with Jesus, you got, as history was written in the Bible, Jesus Christ perceived death was written in the Bible, and also some other outside sources by his enemies. Jesus was betrayed by one of his 12 main disciples, Judas Iscariot, a friend of his, one of the main 12 disciples that were with him. This betrayal and the result were prophesied by Jesus during his 3.5-year ministry, his journeys. Jesus was 33 years old at the culmination of his assignment. Now, up on Clark's side, up on the General Zod basically said that they had been preparing for 33 years in the movie. They had been preparing for 33 years to come and take over the world, to, recruit him, and if he wouldn't be recruited, to kill him and take over the world. They were preparing for 33 years. Jesus was 33 years at the end of his ministry when he died, or perceived to die. So once again, God inspired. um, So Jesus was 33 years at the culmination of his assignment. Jesus chose to follow his heavenly Father's will and not run or do something to prevent this betrayal or what followed. Jesus was arrested by the Jewish Pharisees. He was threatening their power, way of life, as they perceived it to be, because he never did threaten their power. He never did any of that. He was just trying to tell people information and tell people truth, and that's all he was doing. They take him to the head of the Pharisees' hierarchy, and they interview and mock him. Then they present him to the governor of Judea in Jerusalem to be executed by their will. Pilate, the Roman governor over Judea, interviews him. He asked Jesus if he was a king. He wanted to know. He was like, I've been told you're a king. Are you a king? And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So basically, he said he was a king, but his kingdom wasn't of this world. You can't go and find it on a map. It's in another realm. So Pilate thought he was crazy, but finds no criminality in him. He was like, the man's nuts. In his mind, because he didn't believe. So, but he didn't find that he was a criminal. There was no reason to kill him. In his mind. So he exclaimed this to the crowd and the Pharisees and the Jewish priests. They would not accept it. They kept on yelling, crucify him, crucify him. Actually the Pharisees did, and then the crowd joined in because they're sheep, and they just joined in with the Pharisees, So to appease the crowd, he told them that he would have him chastised, which is beaten, lashed, or punished. Even though he knew he was innocent, even though he thought he was crazy or whatever, he wanted to appease the crowd so that they didn't revolt against him, because he was the one who was over their land or trying to take over their land, and that's the last thing he wanted was a revolt. So, and then he said he was going to let him go after that, after he beat him, chastised him. Jesus is handed over to the soldiers of Pilate, and they chastise him and mock him. They shove a crown made of long, extremely sharp thorns down on his head and struck him with a reed to mock him. Okay, these little bitty thorns that people see, they're massive thorns. They were just shoved into his head. This is what Jesus' assignment was. This is what he knew he was going towards, and he didn't run. He didn't stop. He knew all this was coming. His father told him all this was coming, and he bravely went to there and did it. Went there and sacrificed himself in order to save humanity. So obviously they did not believe him, who he was. He was led back to Pilate, and Pilate presented him to the crowd, saying, "Okay, look at the man. The guy's, bleeding from head to toe. He's been beaten. He's been, he's got a crown of thorns shoved on his head. Are you not satisfied?" That's basically what Pilate was saying. Because Pilate, he wasn't. He was a murderer. He was a bloodthirsty murderer. But he was like, this man's innocent. This is crazy. He's just someone who's giving you information. He didn't kill nobody. He didn't hurt nobody. He didn't hurt a Roman. He didn't do any of that. He didn't hurt another, of his people or nothing. There was nothing. He didn't steal. He didn't, nothing. So basically it didn't appease him. The Pharisees in the crowd followed them, shouted, "Crucify him," again, as they had been shouting the whole time. They were not satisfied with the chastising of Jesus, which, upset Pilate. They wanted him dead. Pilate's wife calls to him and explains that she was given a vision, and she suffered greatly and due to the destruction of the righteous man. She told him to let him go. He decides to try one more thing. He brings out a murderer and a traitor from the prison and tells them that he is required by law to let a prisoner go for the celebration of Passover, Jewish holiday. It was a celebration of when God liberated his people when he brought them out of Egypt. That's why they were celebrating. He gave them a choice of Jesus or Barabbas, the known murderer, who had been caught in an insurrection against Rome, and they had put him in prison. The Pharisees shouted, "Free Barabbas!" Because they'd rather have this murderer who would probably murder them in their sleep if he had a chance, other than Jesus, who was an innocent man who only was just out there giving them information. um, Pilate, rolled his eyes and basically said, literally washed his hands of the situation in a bowl of water in front of the out of control crowd. Because he like, I can't stop them. They're gonna revolt if I don't do something. If I don't, give this man to him, even though he knew he was a good man. He had to keep an uprising for happening in the town. He freed Barabbas to them because that's what they asked to do, and then asked, "What of this Jesus?" They once again shouted, "Crucify him!" Pilate, to appease the crowd, he finally handed Jesus over to the men, and he was crucified. This is the end of part 2. There's going to be a part 3. It's going to go more into how Jesus died and how he was resurrected. This is important stuff, guys. This is important. This is life. It doesn't matter if it happened 2,000 years later or before this, or if it happens now. It's the same. They're just people. The whole Bible is just people's stories, the people's journals, all that kind of stuff. It's not lies. It's just life, and we still have the same lives. So I'm Pastor Anthony. I love you. Please go look at Jesus Unraveled. You can see all this for yourself. Divineproof.org or smok.org. SSMOK.org. I love you. I'm Pastor Anthony. Thank you.